Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today I'm taking up more of your questions in another segment of Ask Judy. If you enjoy these segments, please do hit like and subscribe. I have some information, a bit of a correction here from Kathy Strube, who said, Hi, Judy. I live about 45 minutes from Milford, Michigan, and I just wanted to say that Mary Jackson, who I always loved as Miss Mamie Baldwin, went to Western Michigan, not West Michigan. I know that's what the article said, but I was just correcting the article that was written about Mary Jackson. And actually, Mary Jackson played Emily Baldwin. So just so all of you are clear about that. I have been to the cemetery just to pay my respects to her since she was in my part of the woods. I love your podcast. Thank you for doing what you do, since The Waltons is still my favorite show of all time. God bless. Thank you so much, Kathy, for correcting that article, and just to show that the news doesn't always get it right, and nor do I when I am taking some of these sources that are not personal sources of mine. From Carrie Thierry, who said, I'm curious about how much actors rehearse together. Do they run the scenes prior to the actual shooting, or would it depend on the relationship or skill of the actors or the difficulty of the scene? Yes, you're correct on that. Typically what would happen is that when they were moving on to a particular scene, they would bring in all of the actors who were in the scene, and the director would then sort of stage what the movement of the scene was going to be, or if there was no movement, just basically, let's say we're sitting around the radio and we're going to be listening to something. So they'd place all of the actors somewhere in there. Maybe somebody enters, so they'd say, okay, well, Jason, you're coming from downstairs and you're going to join the scene. Or somebody was coming in the front door, but it could just be something where it's the evening and the Waltons are gathered around the radio. So then they would place everybody. They may or may not actually even run through all the dialogue of the scene if it's pretty straight ahead and nobody's going to be moving. If there are going to be people moving, then we might sort of lightly go through it. But that was, kind of it. And then they'd send us away to make sure our hair and makeup were correct, that if we had to change wardrobe, that was done. And they would turn it over to the crew to light the scene and stage the scene, the prop department, whoever, if furniture needed to be moved, if props needed to be brought in, all of that would happen. And lighting would be done. Then they'd call us all back in once the lighting was done, and then we would do a run through for camera. So at that point, we'd go through the whole scene once, twice, fix things if needed. And this was predominantly for the camera more than anything else. And in that case, it's a fairly simple scene. So, and then we just shoot. Now, if any of the actors had wanted to step aside during the lighting process and run something, that would be more likely to happen if it was, a one-on-one scene, and if it was something that one of those actors wanted to have a chance to rehearse. Occasionally, the director might be involved in that, but not necessarily. Maybe if there was some question about the scene, then the director might take those actors aside and do that. I know sometimes when I was directing, I might do that with the actors, particularly if there was an actor who was maybe a little less experienced and kind of wanted to get the flow and make sure the scene was happening, because you don't want to waste time while the camera's waiting. So while lighting is happening is a good time to do those sorts of things. And sometimes, actors might on their own say, hey, can we just run this? Maybe we had a guest who was like, hey, would you mind if we ran through this scene? But I would say that we, as the regular cast, the family members, rarely did that. Or maybe we might in the makeup room while we were all kind of doing touch-ups go, hey, can we just run that dialogue or something? But mostly the actors did their homework on their own. And then if there was some question or something felt odd, or, then it's sort of in the director's hands to direct the scene if he or she wants something different in the scene. So that's sort of my experience with the Waltons. Other shows might run a little bit differently sometimes. Next question is from Captain Hindsight, who I think is AKA Spider's handler, because you started off by saying, yes, it's Spider's handler. So a question for all of you comes to mind when you speak about Mr. Harper's introspective personality and his love of history. I would ask then of Mr. Harper and the rest of you, how much did your character shape you versus how much did you shape your character in this long-running series, The Waltons? Now, I'm sure writers had their own original thoughts, but it's always a collaboration explicitly or implicitly with the regular characters. And since you always read these questions in full on Ask Judy, I would like to remind everyone that you're watching an American icon right this very second, and she deserves at least a like and subscribe. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yes, it was sort of a mix. I mean, originally in the series, early on, those characters were sort of crafted by Earl Hamner because they were based on his family and they were based on the characters from The Homecoming. And so from that point, so we sort of came in with each of us creating those characters based on how they seem to us and our own characteristics that came to us being cast in the first place. When I was cast as Mary Ellen, I saw Mary Ellen as sort of stubborn and headstrong and opinionated and a bit of a rebel and a nonconformist. So that's what I brought to the original audition. And when I auditioned with that scene where we're cracking walnuts in the barn and Mary Ellen's going off on a rant about, the Waltons mountain is so small and it's, how many thousands of miles straight through the middle. All of that was evident in the character, and that was what contributed to me being cast as the role of Mary Ellen in the first place. So we all brought our own ideas about the character, and they clearly meshed with what Earl Hamner as the creator and Fielder Cook as the director, and then whatever producers were present felt fit the role. As we moved into the series, then we brought those aspects of the character with us. Over the course of the series, other personality characteristics might emerge as the characters grew up, got older. The way in which we all as people evolve as we grow up and mature, hopefully. Hopefully mature and hopefully evolve. So I think that particular episodes might bring out some other side of a character, or they might, decide that Jim Bob's going to be interested in aviation. So then that becomes a story point going forward. Or Mary Ellen determining she wants to be a nurse became then a storyline that drove aspects of her character and her personality, like what her actions were, becoming a nurse and then wanting to become a doctor, and also how that informed who she was as a person and her interest in caring for people and that compassion that existed. So that would be the case for sort of each of us in many ways. I think writers got to see personality aspects, things that we brought to the characters, or things that they saw about us in real life, because a number of the producers were also writers. And then writers sort of piggyback on what previous writers have done. So it continues to evolve, that something gets established and then it gets continued, or something gets established but gets dropped because nobody ever continued that aspect. And that would probably be more likely in an episode that a writer that didn't write a lot for the Waltons set up something, but it just didn't get picked up to be continued as an aspect. So you've probably seen cases of that as well. So thank you for that question. I hope you enjoyed this segment of Ask Judy. And if you have a question, just put it in any of the comments below. That's where I pull all of the questions from. And I will see you next time for more behind the scenes of the Waltons, about episodes, more of your questions with Ask Judy, and more special guests. Thanks for watching.